Support comes from Seattle Rep, presenting a bold new season of powerful stories, including the world premiere musical Freak the Mighty, the satire Eureka Day, and the award-winning classic Amadeus. Subscriptions to the 2026-27 season include free exchanges and discounts at local businesses. Visit seattlerep.org.
You know, every day on Up First, NPR's Golden Globe-nominated morning news podcast, we bring you three essential stories. At the heart of each story are questions. What really happened? What really mattered? What happens next? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious and to follow the facts. Follow Up First wherever you get your podcasts and start your day knowing what matters and why.
Part of the fun of living in this literary era is seeing how modern authors take old concepts, sometimes even cliches, and make them new again. Seattle's Molly Olguín is one of those authors. Her debut short story collection, The Sea Gives Up the Dead, takes some classic elements of folklore and fairy tales, even some biblical references, and gives them new life. Pun intended for those of you who have read the book. Like, you know those stories about handsome knights in shining armor who save the beautiful princess from the dragon? Well, what if the knight was actually a nanny with a forbidden love for the princess? And what if the dragon was all over cable news? I'm Katie Campbell, and you're listening to a bonus episode of Meet Me Here, KUOW's Arts and Culture podcast. The KUOW Book Club read Molly's collection of short stories in April, and I sat down with her on April 23rd in front of a live audience at the Seattle Central Library to talk about folklore and fairy tales and the power of queering old stories. We started by talking about the titular story in this collection, The Sea Gives Up the Dead, a story about grief and love and, above all, change. We have a mother in the story, Selma, whose child, Eddie, has been killed at war. And when she's invited to France to visit her child's purported grave, she actually finds that her child's very much alive, but different.
Yep.
Perhaps you can say more about what's different.
So when she gets to Paris, the child that she finds turns out to be her daughter, Eddie. Eddie has transitioned, and she has discovered this sort of like almost by circumstance. There's sort of like a supernatural element that makes that clear.
And I want you to say more about the transition and what that represented, because it's not the only time in this collection that you play with this concept of the assigned self, let's say, dying and making way for the true self. Why did you want to play with identity in that way in this story and elsewhere in the collection?
Oh, I love that. I think in this story, like what Selma sort of does on her journey is like have to confront the choices she's made as a mother. And then she has like an encounter with this sort of supernatural being on this ship who really pushes her to reconsider her choices. And as she's sort of like having to give things up, the thing that she gives up is actually not herself. Like she has all of these thoughts that are very like sort of self-oriented, like, do I need to change in this way? Do I need to do X? Do I need to do Z? And the answer turns out to be like, no, you need to like give up Eddie's life. Like Eddie is like the person whose choices actually matter here. And so Selma's like change is about accepting someone else's change. And I think change in the book is sort of the thing I'm interested in, right? All the stories are like different genres.
Yeah.
I've got like, some of them are magic, some of them are science fiction. I've got like a dragon. And so because they're different genres, like I've got historical fiction and like realism, the thing that is the same is like most of them are set in the same place. So they're all in San Pedro, which is the neighborhood in Los Angeles where I grew up. And I think they're all members of the same family. And so they have like the same names, or the names kind of reoccur. But it's about like how many things can change and how many different deaths and rebirths can like this collection of people go through.
You put them through so much. My goodness. One of the things too is just this concept of queering a story. You do it so, I don't know what the right word is. Like delicately is the word I want to use, but that's not quite right. It's just part of the story, right? You take a classic story, for example, like a princess who's trapped inside by a dragon. And instead of a knight coming to her rescue, you have a nanny. And it's beautiful. And it feels just right. But talk about what it means to queer a story, why you wanted to do that with some of these very classic, almost cliche concepts.
Ooh. I don't even think it was like a very conscious decision. I think the queering truly just came from like I am a queer person and like I'm part of a queer community, and that is like gonna happen in my fiction no matter what.
Yeah.
So the Princess Wants for Company is the story about the princess who gets sort of rescued-ish by a nanny. And that didn't like come out of a desire to like subvert. That came out of just a desire to like explore the nanny. And so I was like, ooh, like what does this person want? Like what does this person sort of aspire to? Like what is she afraid of? And it turned out to be like kind of wanting access to this world that she feels very excluded from and very shut out from, and then maybe she doesn't actually want it when she gets there.
Right.
Yeah.
What you just said there made me think about another author that we've had on the KUOW Book Club, Corinne Manning, who's also local, who wrote a fantastic collection called We Had No Rules.
Yes.
And one of the things we talked about was how Corinne's work is labeled like it's queer literature. And while they don't, need that label exactly, that Corinne feels like the queer literature shelf is kind of the coolest shelf to be on right now.
It is the coolest shelf to be on, yes.
How do you feel about that? Like even me asking about like queering a story when it was just a story that you wanted to tell.
Well, I'm like, okay, yeah, queering a story. Like, are all of my stories queered because I'm the one writing them? It is like I love that description. Yes, the queer shelf is the best shelf to be on. I'm very happy to be on that shelf. And I also think when I think about like, this is being queered, there's sort of an element of, this is like the point in some way. And I don't know that queerness is the point even of The Sea Gives Up the Dead, which is about like this mom accepting her trans daughter. Right. It's like the point is about this understanding of like, you have to like set aside your own ego and you have to set aside like your own importance. And so the queering is just like, I don't want to say like an afterthought, but it's like a fact.
It's a lens,
yeah,
right? It's a
lens.
way to get to that acceptance.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about some of the deeper points of these stories. And we're going to stick with this one because it got me. There's also this thick layer of grief haunting the story. It's almost claustrophobic. I felt very tense and like I was all wound up reading it. Was that intentional?
Yes.
Okay.
So that story actually has its roots in reality. I think my great-grandmother went on a Gold Star voyage, which these are real like voyages that happened, I think, after both World War I and World War II. So her son died in World War I, and his body, he died in Flanders Field, and so his body was buried in France. And she, I think it was like 20 years later, all of these mothers of soldiers who had died in World War I were like given free passage by the government to go on the ship. And so I was thinking about like, what would it be like to be this mom, like surrounded by other moms who have also lost their sons, who are all together, like going to find those graves. Like it's not one person's grief. It's like, these were like hundreds and hundreds of women together, like just all reliving something that had also happened like 20 years earlier. And I'm like, that must be like so cathartic and also terrible.
It felt that way. It felt like this beautiful moment. And as she finds Eddie, she kind of reflects on that, right? And she thinks about all those mothers, not just the ones she traveled with, but she says, the German mothers, the French mothers, all of these other women. And it felt that way. It felt kind of personal. Mm-hmm. How do you conjure grief like that? Have you experienced a grief like that? I don't want to assume that you haven't been to France looking for your long lost son, but
nope, not yet.
Hopefully never. Yeah.
My son is my cat, so I hope he never ends up in France.
Unless it's like a really cool trip.
For sure. I think my experience of grief has not been like that direct, but it's something that I'm really interested in because all of us humans experience grief. And you brought up change earlier. Grief is, I think, a response to change. Like the first story, 7 Deaths, really thinks about like all the different like ways that death sort of represents change in a life. And I think a lot of this book is really about that moment of like, how do you grapple with like a new reality? I actually did a couple months ago, this is not a big grief, it's a small grief, but it's real. I lost my cat who I'd had for 10 years. And that like experience was really like, life was this way and now it's that way. And like, what do I do with like a new a new set of like parameters for the world. And like, that's really interesting to me as a writer.
Stay with this a little bit. Why? There was a lot of stories in here that dealt with grief, familial grief, friend grief, kind of like state of the world grief. Why did you want to talk so much about grief in this collection? What's on your heart, Molly?
Well, oh my God. Well, first of all, I didn't write most of these stories super recently. I wrote a lot of them about 8 or 9 years ago. And so 8 or 9 years ago, I was in grad school and I was like 26, I was a baby. And I don't know, I think I was going through a lot of change. And so the world back then was not, I think, in some ways as dark as the world we're in now. And so I was maybe writing about things that were darker and sadder. Things I'm writing about now are happier. And so I think that's also, like, I think if I wrote this book now, it would be a very different book.
That's fascinating because the world is crazy.
Yeah.
Why do you want to write happy things?
I think there's like a little, you try to write what you need. There are stories that like, I think the most recent story in the book is The Sea Gives Up the Dead, the title story. I wrote that 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so I think that's more along the lines of like the stories that I'm interested in right now.
It has a happy ending.
It has a happy ending.
There's acceptance, there's change, there's a hug.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It's a little...
Less bleak?
Yeah. Thank you. Exactly. In addition to there being a lot of folklore and fairy tales and those kinds of vibes, it also feels very biblical.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Talk about why you wanted to include some elements of like sainthood and the devil and all of that fun stuff.
So I grew up Catholic.
You don't say.
Grew up Catholic, and then in grad school, I actually discovered this. This is one of my favorite facts. I learned that even though I hadn't gone to church in many years, according to the Catholic Church, that doesn't make me not a Catholic. It makes me a bad Catholic.
Okay.
If you want to not be Catholic anymore, you have to go through a very legal process. You have to like write a letter to a bishop and get the bishop to write you back. Like you have to go through like it's very bureaucratic. And I think when I like learned that, I was very like, oh my God, like I'm still in this like category. I'm still part of this like weird magical community that I truly did not feel like much of a connection to.
Sure.
And then suddenly I did because I was like, oh, I'm still part of it. And then I was thinking about like all of these like strange rituals that I grew up with and all these like, oh, you say this word at this time and then you say this word at this time. And I was very just like suddenly intrigued with all of the trappings that were of my childhood, but not really of my adulthood.
So you said before that you wrote a lot of these when you were like 26 and it sounds like very angsty.
Yes.
Were you exploring then those connections to the church at that time?
I would say creatively, yes. I was really interested in just kind of revisiting. A lot of this book is to do with my childhood. I said all the stories are set in Los Angeles, but a lot of them are drawn from like my family stories and family lore. And so the Catholicism sort of became part of like the atmosphere of the family lore, if that makes sense.
It does. And I want to talk about one of the stories that really brought that to mind, and that's Clara Aguilera's Holy Lungs. So we're actually going to have you read a couple of pages from that to set the tone.
Okay. Clara Aguilera's Holy Lungs. Clara died, as all the others did, at God's hand. He sent an asteroid hurtling toward the world, and the world sent bombs to shoot it out of the sky, narrowly averting an age of ashen death. But of course, God had the last word. A little fragment of alien rock dropped into the Pacific, 20 miles from Catalina Island, cracking open the ocean floor. A great wave stretched up over the coast, bathing the port of Los Angeles in an eerie green light before it came crashing down. It swallowed up the shantytown at E Street, the Bradbury Building, the fiberglass whales of the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, the Pink Castle in Orange County, and the ancient wood of Olvera Street with equanimity. Only 2 things truly left Los Angeles whole, and those were Clara Aguilera's holy body and Clara Aguilera's holy lungs. When Clara was alive, she was no one in particular. A freshman at Pedro High, chubby with baby fat and oily with puberty. In death, she became a sensation. Her body washed up on the new Oregon coast months after the disaster, only a mile from the refugee camp at Eugene. The lifeguard who waded in after her was the first to feel that something was wrong. An unusually warm wave rolled into his belly when he swam to Clara's side, heat seeping into him. The body drifted closer, giving him a glimpse of her white toes in the green water. He suddenly remembered a film he'd seen as a child, where a princess bathed in a lake, and her gown billowed around her like wings, and when he caught hold of Clara's ankles, he half convinced himself she would smile, like the princess. She didn't look like a body. She was not bloated. She was not decayed. Her face was tipped up out of the foam, her eyes closed. But she was dead all the same, and he shook so badly that she slid out of his arms twice on the journey back to shore. Her picture swept across the nation, waiting to be claimed, and it worried everyone who saw it, little splinters of unease working under the skin. She didn't look dead, but they were assured she was. In some deep and animal way, this was troubling. A man in Georgia who had only glanced at her image on his phone woke up gasping from a dream where Oregon's Jane Doe lay beside him in his bed, softly breathing in and out. It wasn't a nightmare. He trembled with an unexplained tenderness, his chest aching with it, muscles drawn tight, making it difficult to exhale. The trouble grew as each day passed and she did not rot, the boundary between life and death growing less distinct, a border that seemed impossible when faced with the reality of her healthy skin, her unclouded eyes. She was distinguished from the living by the clean wound on her back, just under her ribs, and the empty hollows where her lungs should be. The coroner was without explanation, lost in her presence. When he touched her, a sweet smell like crushed roses filled the air, and longing throbbed in his palms. Rigor mortis had not set in. She looked like a girl about to wake from sleep. The Eugene police station received more phone calls every day, strangers from far-off towns demanding to know if they'd made any progress with the incorruptible girl's case. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, let's have a round of applause. Thank you. Like so many of your stories, I was like instantly grabbed from the beginning because you're just like, wait, what happened? Like everybody else? Wait, well, what happened here? What was on your mind writing that story?
Oh gosh, what was on my mind?
Gotta go back to 26-year-old you.
Right. Yeah, 26-year-old me. Okay, I was really interested in this idea of like disaster. I think the idea of like climate change, the idea of I think that was, I don't know if that was the beginning of the time or just we now live in a permanent era of the time when you see people filming disasters on their phones and you're like, oh, we're now in this like different sort of world where this place that was familiar and we all know what this place looks like suddenly becomes a hellscape. And so I was thinking about what does my childhood look like as a hellscape? What is like my childhood home? Like the aquarium referenced in there is like the aquarium I like kind of grew up going to all the time. And so I was like, oh, I'm like really picturing like the place of like childhood and safety being suddenly an unsafe place. And also I was in my big like let me look up fun Catholic facts, and so I learned about incorruptible saints. That's a real thing. It's so weird. It's like here's like someone who just doesn't rot and they smell like roses, and we're gonna say that that's like a sacred thing, and we're gonna put them under like a glass coffin. You can go and like visit them still, and like we're gonna be like this is a holy body because look, it didn't rot. And that's just a really odd like magical concept. And so I was picturing just like a version of like my childhood self as like the girl who doesn't rot.
You got real fired up there. I can imagine that got you fired up creatively to think of something like that.
It's fun.
There is another line, and this is towards the end of this story, that really like hit me. Natalie, who is the saint's sister, Natalie drew in trembling breath after trembling breath and tried vainly to transmute her horror into faith. And it gave me pause because in a lot of ways, that's what it felt like you were doing with this collection.
Ooh.
That each story was a trembling breath in itself. Does that seem fair?
That seems totally fair. I love that. Yeah.
Well, then, if that's the case, the quote ends with trying to transmute her horror into faith. Faith in what? What did you want to transmute our horror into?
So in that moment, all these other characters have accepted Clara as like a saint, right? Everyone is like, she's performing miracles like all around the world. Like everyone is like reassured by her, comforted by her. And Natalie is unable to see her sister as anything but her sister. And so she's sort of a saint for everyone except Natalie. And for Natalie, like, she can get no comfort from her sister's body. Her sister's body is just a body. And the horror that she has is like, I was thinking about the difference between ghosts and saints. I think there's a line earlier in the story about that too, where the difference between a saint and a ghost is that you want one to appear to you. and the other one you really don't. And I think in experiencing horror, there's the possibility of comfort, maybe, or at least of like, not like hope exactly, but like of some kind of reassurance about the natural order of things. And I think I find that both very tantalizing and sort of impossible. So it's in the trembling breath, not actually in the reaching it.
Wow, I love that. I recently got to interview my favorite author on the face of the planet, Stephen Graham Jones.
Oh my God, yes.
Who's a phenomenal horror writer. And one of the things we talked about was like, what do you do with fear? How do you use that? And what he said is he really likes writing horror stories, in part because he's a little messed up. And that's okay, because so am I. But because they keep us alive, they keep us vigilant, they teach us how to be afraid and look more deeply. And in the case of his stories, he also teaches us to look more deeply at the things we are afraid of, like monsters. And that was also kind of a vibe I got, is like the horror of this particular story is less, I think, in the kind of death toll that's only hinted at briefly. You only briefly talk about it. Mm-hmm. And more in the way that people want to cling to a thing.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
Okay,
that's fun. Yeah, I think in the story, like the idea of the saint, like Clara, the person was not a saint. Clara, the person, was just like a girl, right? And so the idea of like her becoming a symbol, like that's also, I think, like sort of a violent process. And as like people are trying to like find reassurance and comfort and like really truly finding some kind of relief in like this idea of like, oh, okay, all of these horrible things happened, but like look at like a beautiful idea came out of it. Yeah. Like the beautiful idea is actually like still sort of doing violence to the real person. I don't know if that like was actually related to what you were saying or not.
No, I think it is. It's like a claiming.
Right.
Okay, now I really want to talk about my favorite story in the collection, which is very different from the others, in part because it's a little more fun. This is, as we mentioned, The Princess Wants for Company, and I was so in from jump because it starts with the concept of a news report, like a cable news report about a dragon on the loose. And there was just something about that grabbed me. Maybe it's because I'm from Florida. And you see those like alligators walking across golf courses and I'm like, no, we do have those news reports. But it just immediately brought me into this world, which was like kind of like Hollywood Hills-ish, like wealthy area, and everyone's freaking out because there is a dragon on the loose. And it's also great because you have a standard-ish princess trapped by dragon story, and your nanny is our knight in shining armor. And one of the things that I really loved about the story is that she and her princess get to have this kind of beautiful moment. I guess, first of all, where did you get the idea for this fantastic cable news-making dragon?
So there's like a real story from like, I think the 1950s. I should have like remembered who this was. There was like some like famous actor who got, I think, a toe bitten off by a Komodo dragon because he was being an idiot and like provoking a Komodo dragon. And then there was like a real like, I think it was a real story of like a Komodo dragon that escaped from the zoo.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, I love this idea so much. There's a literal dragon on the loose, right. And it's like 1950s Los Angeles. Yes. And then I was like, well, what if I made the dragon a little dragon ear?
So I told you backstage, though, that I do have a little bone to pick with you on this story.
Let's hear it.
And that is because, so our nanny and our princess get to share this beautiful moment. They get to kiss. They have this moment of passion, not to spoil it. And then it's a sad ending, Molly. What gives? Why?
Okay.
There's no happily ever after. I'm very mad.
Blame 26-year-old angsty Molly.
I do.
I think I think in that story, again, I said like the nanny's point of view is the thing I was really interested in. Yeah. And so she's like in love with the woman she's nannying for, right? And like the woman she's nannying for is like, I think like genuinely very trapped in her little castle, but she's also like fairly selfish and self-centered. Yeah. And the nanny is totally in love with her, but she's also like not really able to connect with her in like a deeper way. Right. And the other thing that the nanny is trapped by is caring for this baby. And she's okay. So I did some nannying or sort of nannying when I was like 18, and I really did not like it. And so I was really thinking about like, really being around babies when you're not like a baby person teaches you that babies are like individual people. You're like, wow, I vibe with this baby and I don't have a personality conflict, right? And so it was really...
baby's a jerk.
I had to take care of this one baby, and I think I did a good job taking care of him, but he hated me, and I was like, I don't like you either. Like, and, it was really like, okay, if you're trapped in this relationship where you're taking care of a baby that you don't really want to care for, and then you're also in this relationship with someone who only thinks about herself and doesn't think about you, and you're also in this like sort of like beautiful mansion that you literally have to stay inside because you can't go outside because they're a dragon. Of course it had to end badly. Come on.
I'm just saying, it could have been. I wanted to ask about this in part 2 because going back to like queering a narrative and what it means to write queer literature now, a complaint I hear from a lot of queer writers and readers is that there's so often tragedy in those stories. And it's just like, why can't I just have a happily ever after? And so that's kind of what it made me think about too, is I was like, man, we were so close, Molly. And then it takes a turn for the worst. And so I wonder why, as a queer creative, who I don't know if you have that same complaint, maybe you like dark stuff like I do too. I hate a happy ending, even though I wanted it in this case, but why not give the reader a nice little ending?
I think a thing that I was really thinking about there was, again, 26-year-old Molly, I do just like dark stuff, right? I love a sad ending. I love a tragedy. And so I was just kind of writing stuff that I was interested in following the path, right? But when I came back to it, I really did go, this book is too sad. And so before I like sent it out into the world again, I was like, let me like lighten it up a little bit. And I don't know that the stories that I wrote were that much lighter because The Sea Gives Up the Dead was one of them.
Fair.
So it was like a way of saying, okay, this actually, there is a little hope in the world here. I think The Princess Wants for Company, I was never gonna let Raffaella have a happy ending because I'm sorry, Raffaella, I love you. But she is trapped by like the relationship she has. And like the only way for her to like get a happy ending would be to like leave that house forever.
And that's fair. Freedom is important.
Yeah.
So you wrote these a few years ago, and now we are in a time where it feels like people need to know what to do with their grief.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably was too a decade ago. What do you hope that people can take from this collection in terms of like, how do I grapple with the fact that Raffaella didn't get her happy ending?
Ooh.
And that I might not too.
Right. Well, I think a lot of life is not like tidy like that, right? Like life doesn't have happy endings because life doesn't have a lot of endings, honestly. Life has change. And so when it's over, like you don't have anything else to do. Like there's nothing to process. So like what you have to think about is what's going to happen next, right? And so a lot of these stories are, again, the characters dealing with things that are really sad, but also having to deal with it. Another way I've talked a lot about this book is like through the lens of fairy tales. The thing with fairy tales, and why I find myself like endlessly fascinated by them and going back to them, is that they're neither explanations, like a myth is an explanation, or like something really important like a legend, right? Like a legend is like, here's like a great deed that was done. A myth is like, here's how thunder works. A fairy tale is like, something messed up happened and now you have to deal with it. And that's life in 2026. Messed up things keep happening and we just have to keep dealing with it.
I'm glad you just said that you like to think about fairy tales, because my next question is about what inspires you. Where do you draw your inspiration for your writing?
Ooh. So as I said, this book is like fairy tales and family lore. A lot of the stories like are either drawn very directly from like things that happened to family members or stories that family members told me when I was small. And so the things that I think really like directly inspire me there are just like, okay, that storytelling, right? So like family fairy tales, and then like, Hans Christian Andersen's in the mix. And the things that are inspiring me now, I think, are still just like other people's stories. I write a lot of like adaptations and retellings, and I think that like the Little Mermaid retelling in the collection. And a lot of the other ones are sort of like adaptations just of those family stories. So maybe the thing that inspires me is other people's stories.
Support comes from Seattle Rep, presenting a bold new season of powerful stories, including the world premiere musical Freak the Mighty, the satire Eureka Day, and the award-winning classic Amadeus. Subscriptions to the 2026-27 season include free exchanges and discounts at local businesses. Visit seattlerep.org.
Call your friends, your partner, and maybe a babysitter because Seattle Restaurant Week is here. I'm Brandy Fullwood, host of Seattle Eats, and on the latest episode, Seattle writer Harry Cheadle has been doing the math so you don't have to. We'll tell you about the deals, dishes, and drink pairings worth checking out this Seattle Restaurant Week. Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It sounds like you like to break rules a little bit, and you like to take things and shatter them a little and put them back together into something cool.
Oh, yeah.
You happen to be a teacher.
Yes.
First of all, how do you teach the youth about these rules and then teach them how to break those rules in fun ways?
Oh, it's so much fun. So it is a great joy of my life to be able to teach kids both like, here's like literature and here's like, let's just nerd out about stories together, but then also teach them to create their own stories. I'm teaching a short fiction class right now, and a lot of what I give them is rules. I'm like, you dialogue tags have to work like this. No, it's not negotiable. And then I tell them the rule, and then like a kid will come to me and they'll be like, Molly, I'm looking at a published book and they broke the rule. And then he'll be like, well, okay, you're allowed to. It's just, you can't yet. And so a lot of what we talk about is like, all right, what is the effect? And so if you are going to break a rule, there has to be a reason why you're breaking the rule. If you're going to break a story apart, I like your metaphor of like taping it back together. You do have to take it back together. You can't just leave it in pieces on the floor.
Right.
And so that process is like a really fun, I think, process of discovery. And I hope that my students like get to have fun playing with their own little puzzle pieces.
I hope so too. I think about, I'm going to keep calling them the youth today, and just like the vast array of stuff that is there for them to consume. Not just cool books like yours, but just like TikToks.
Sure.
How do you show them the value of like a collection like yours, and not only reading it, but writing one? And how do you keep that creativity that you embody, that kind of dynamic style, alive in the next generation?
You know, I think I really have not yet met a group of students who didn't really want to tell their own stories. I think sometimes they want those stories to take different shapes. I've had students who are like, I really want to write video game scripts. And I'm like, I know nothing about that, but like, what a beautiful journey to go on. There's so many like shapes for stories to take, but creativity is a fundamental human joy. And like, I've never met a group of kids who is not really interested in like, yeah, I want to tell my stories. Like, I want to figure out what my stories are. I want to figure out the medium for them. And maybe the medium is something that like I don't even know about yet. But kids, I think, really, they enjoy making art. Making art is a thing that humans like.
Totally. You said that, and it just jarred loose, though, a memory of one of your other stories in which a like super AI imbued robot is being made, and just like the majority of my notes were just like, this is too real, Molly, like stop it.
You want to know a horrible thing?
Yes, I do, please.
I wrote that way before AI was a thing.
For a brief second I thought you were gonna be like, I wrote that with AI, and I was gonna be like,
oh God, no, Jesus. Absolutely not.
So I mean, like you played with this story envisioning like this AI that, not quite AI, it's like a robot, but it's a super intelligent robot.
Yes.
And it starts to embody its creator's dead partner, which, again, I was just like, that's just so real. How do you feel about that story right now, and about what you envisioned and how it's taking shape?
I don't think I could write that story now, honestly.
Yeah.
I was really, at the time, like, interested in like, okay, well, what makes a human? What makes a person? Like, if they're making this like hyper intelligent AI, like, would it, like, I think in that story, it's not really her dead wife, it's manipulating her.
Right.
And so I was like, but it's like a being and it's like coming to life. And now I'm such a robot hater. Like, I would not be able to write a story in which I was sympathetic to the robot in the same way.
Right.
I'm one of those people who's prejudiced to Data in Star Trek. Like, it's terrible. But like, AI has really just like turned me around on the robot future.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that aspect of it. Like, it's literally being like, you made me. There's a portion in there that says like, you created me. I want what you want.
Yes.
So that doesn't feel right to you anymore.
No.
Fascinating.
I think like, as a teacher, I'm also constantly fighting with ChatGPT. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think at the time, and like big picture, I still think like if we're going to make like a thing that can think for itself, that'll be our child, right? That won't actually be something else. That'll just be the next generation of humans.
Sure.
But in practice with like the technology we actually have now, I'm like, oh, this isn't a child. This is a thing that's taking away like children's ability to like think and like feel.
Yeah.
And that's my enemy, the things that stop us from thinking and feeling.
Yeah. Are your students grappling with how to use that or not?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll bet. Can you
Yep.
say more? I'm just super interested in this.
Oh my God. It's a very chaotic little world. I'm obviously AI's biggest hater, but there are teachers at my school who are like, oh, we're going to use it in like these like prescribed ways. And like, there's ways you can, you know, be effective, like thinkers with it. And so I think students are really struggling to figure out like where's the line. Like Molly's like, absolutely never. And then other teachers are like, you know, you can use it for like this like science project, or like trying to figure out in what ways is this a tool and for what tasks. And so sometimes they make decisions where we have to have a meeting about it. A lot of kids will come to me and sort of say like, I don't understand like why people are using AI like to cheat. I don't understand why you would do it for especially like creative writing. Like we've had a lot of conversations about that. Like, why would you give away the fun part? Like being able to think up your own ideas is the fun part.
That makes me so happy to hear that they're asking that question, because I will fight you for the title of biggest AI hater. I don't like it.
My email signature, my literal email signature is this email was written by a human being without the assistance of AI.
Perfect. Thank you. That's beautiful. I love it. Well, my last question. Last month, we spoke with Sasha Takshablu-Lapointe. You were here for it. She was fabulous.
Yes, she was.
She's written extensively, too, about her queer identity and the Coast Salish stories, kind of folklore that her great-grandmother, Vi Takshablu-Hilbert, told her throughout her life. And thinking about my conversation with Sasha and with you today, I want to ask why you think it's important now and anytime, really. Why is it important to have queer writers sharing these stories, a different lens, not your heteronormative lens that so much, especially in the classroom, so many stories are? Why is it key to have voices like yours and Sasha?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just solve that for us.
In the classroom, we have like this concept of windows and mirrors, right? So like the idea is every child should be able to see themselves reflected in a mirror. So that's a valuable experience. Like you look into the mirror, you see yourself. So you read the story that has a perspective like yours. You understand yourself in like conversation with like people across time, right? But you also really need windows. Otherwise, you're just sort of like being a narcissist looking at yourself all the time. So you need to be able to look through that window and like see, oh, this is someone else's experience. So like you need queer writers, you need like all kinds of writers, because you need to be able to recognize yourself and you need to be able to recognize and love other people.
I spoke to Molly for a KUOW Book Club live event in partnership with the Seattle Public Library on April 23rd. Our next author will be Sonora Jaw. Sonora will join me at the Seattle Central Library on May 21st to talk about her latest novel, Intemperance. RSVP at kuow.org/events. And join the KUOW Book Club at kuow.org/books. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of Meet Me Here. Meet Me Here is produced by KUOW, a proud member of the NPR network. It's hosted by me, Katie Campbell, Dyer Oxley, and Jeannie Yandel. And it's produced by Brandy Fullwood, Kyle Norris, and Matt Martin. Our editor is Phyllis Fletcher. You can find more and support the show at kuow.org/meet. I'm Katie Campbell, and I'll meet y'all back here for our next regularly scheduled episode on Wednesday.
Support comes from Seattle Rep, presenting a bold new season of powerful stories, including the world premiere musical Freak the Mighty, the satire Eureka Day, and the award-winning classic Amadeus. Subscriptions to the 2026-27 season include free exchanges and discounts at local businesses. Visit seattlerep.org.
Soundside brings you beyond the headlines with news and conversation rooted in the Pacific Northwest. I'm Libby Dankman. Every week I sit down with local journalists for Soundside's Front Page, where we give you a shortcut to understanding the latest news and cultural moments and how they affect us here in the Puget Sound region. It's all here on Soundside, on the radio or streaming Monday through Thursday at noon and 8 p.m. on KUOW, on the KUOW app, or wherever you get your podcasts.